Thank you.
I would like to come visit you. I'll bring them along.
Are we good to start, Nate?
Ready?
All right. Welcome, everyone.
record?
According to the cloud. Okay, everyone, so we are,
Did you see this?
getting started with the June 14th, board workshop, joint activities board workshop, and we are grateful to have here Health and Wellness Service Team, St. Paul, Ramsey County Public Health, Environmental Health Division, presenting at today's workshop and for their continued commitment to delivering on outcomes that align with the mission, vision, and values of Ramsey. So for this workshop, if we could hold questions till the end, I would appreciate it. We're going to get through the material, and they'll be delivering the information together, and then we'll have an opportunity to have questions. I'm told that if all goes well and we're very good, we might get a preview of food scraps information at the end. So let's be on our best behavior, and I will turn it over to Director Sarah Holly.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners, County Manager O'Connor. Are slides being projected this time?
Well, an introduction.
Yeah, we gotta do introductions first.
Great. I'll start. I'm Ramsey County Commissioner, District 1.
Rafael Ortega, District 5.
Victoria Reinhardt, District 7.
Jim McDonough, District 6.
Krista Castillo, District 3.
Michael Reed, Ramsey County Environmental Health, Division Manager for Recycling and Energy.
Good afternoon, Sarah Holly, Director of St. Paul Ramsey County Public Health.
And Acting Deputy County Manager of Health and Wellness.
This week.
Take all the titles,
This week.
right?
According to Prince, you're the second Deputy County Manager.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you catch that this morning? Yeah.
Ryan O'Connor.
You forgot to put acting in there. He's already got you in that spot.
Tony Carter, Commissioner, District 4. We'll go to that.
Susan Earl, Ramsey County Finance. Ray Eden Frank, Environmental Health Division Director, Interim.
Ganatra, Chief Enforcement Officer for Ramsey County.
Hanson, Joint Activities Manager for Ramsey, Washington.
My name is Morgan, student intern. B. Chang, Chief Clerk.
Harrington, County Manager's Office.
Chris Waylagi, Accounting Manager.
Derek Joel, Tony Fisher. Victoria Reinhardt.
He's new here.
And just to clarify, Mamie Morgan is a student intern with the District 1 office.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. It's great to be here.
Oh, he did tell, I'm sorry.
Missed that. Madam Chair, Commissioners, County Manager, it's great to be here this afternoon. On behalf of Health and Wellness Service Team and on behalf of Health and Wellness Service Team and St. Paul Ramsey County Public Health, I want to thank the board and County Manager O'Connor for your continued support of the joint activities partnership between Ramsey County and Recycling and Energy. As a part of our agenda today, again, we are joined by Mr. Michael Reed. He is the Environmental Health Division Manager for Recycling and Energy, and a member of the the R&E Joint Leadership Team. We're also joined by Ray Eden Frank. She's our Interim Environmental Health Director, and Mr. Sam Hansen, Recycling and Energy Joint Activities Manager. They'll all be presenting today as a part of this board presentation. In addition, we have online Ms. Renee Vogt, our Ramsey County Deputy Finance Director, and a member of our R&E Joint Leadership Team, and Chris Waylagi, who's in the audience, R&E Accounting Manager, are also here and present for any questions and discussion that come up this afternoon. I also want to note that after 3 decades of having Mr. Zach Hansen serve in the role of both R&E Joint Leadership and as our Environmental Health Division Director, that this position has now been split up between 2 positions, with Michael serving as our R&E Division Manager and Ms. Ray Eden Frank as our Interim Environmental Health Division Director. I want to note that as a part of our presentation today. With that said, today's workshop will demonstrate the importance of longstanding partnerships between Ramsey and Washington counties. It began in the 1980s and led to the 2016 purchase of the R&E Center in Newport, Minnesota. And the work continues today to protect the health, and the environment while striving to extract the maximum value from discarded materials here in our counties. The principles guiding this work include planning for a 20 to 30-year horizon, building on the current system while allowing changes in processing to emerge over time, assuring flexibility, managing risks, and pivoting the view of our discarded materials from that of waste to one of resources to add value to the local economy and environment. Through your continued commitment as a county and within our Public Health Department, along with Ramsey and Washington Recycling and Energy Board in Washington County, we continue to work aggressively to move waste up the hierarchy, collaborate with our communities through education and engagement and awareness, technical assistance and expertise on these efforts to maximize waste reduction, reuse, recycling, and composting waste to energy. Now I'll move to read our county land acknowledgement before we begin today's presentation. I'll begin. Every county owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will, some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life, and some have lived on this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We are standing on the ancestral lands of the Dakota people. We want to acknowledge the Ojibwe, the Ho-Chunk, and the other nations of people who also call this place home. We pay respects to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the treaties made by the tribal nations that entitle non-Native people to live and work on traditional Native lands. Consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us here today. Please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. Right over to Mr. Michael Reed.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair, Commissioners. Gotta figure out the technology here. Okay, there we are. So the purpose of today's workshop, at the May 19th R&E Facility and Finance Committee meeting, commissioners from both Ramsey and Washington County requested a workshop to discuss the joint activities budget. The Washington County budget is happening as we speak right now, so Nikki and I can compare notes when we get done here. So the purpose of today's workshop is to examine joint activities programming and confirm the 2023 budget approval process and timeline. Reference will be made to the facility budget, but it's not the focus of this workshop. Review how the joint activity programs align with Ramsey County goals. Provide the Ramsey County Board an opportunity for discussion and for me as a member of the joint leadership team to gain input on the joint activities budget. The expected outcome is confirming your preference for 2023 joint activities funding. So on the next slide after this, I'm going to be covering the 2023 budget timeline. Recall that 73% of the recycling and energy operation is Ramsey County, and remaining 27% Washington County. And this partnership is a continuation of the relationship between Ramsey and Washington going all the way back to the 1980s. And, it started as the Resource Recovery Project. We just have a much more interesting name today with the partnership referred to as Recycling and Energy. Much more action-oriented than Resource Recovery Project.
So back up, play, resume share, one over, yep, hit play.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Right there,
Thank you.
and now just get out of that area, there you go.
All right. Thank you. So for those of you on the R&E board, you've seen this slide multiple times, but I wanted to highlight a number of different changes to the process this year. Based on feedback received from members of the R&E board, changes were made to the 2023 budget timeline to provide opportunity for more input from the R&E board and respective county boards. Two items highlighted above, well, not highlighted above, but they're different color here. This year, the R&E board reviews budget objectives April 21, 2022, and then the second item here, the county board workshops on June 14th, are additions to the process this year. So And back in April 21st, the Arnie Board reviewed budget objectives for offering their input early on in the process. And then the County Board Workshop is obviously what's happening today. What happened last year was the Arnie Board adopted the 2022 Joint Activities Budget before there was an opportunity for input from the respective county boards. And I understand that caused a few conflicts for Washington County, and so to be responsive to those concerns, we changed the process, and I think this is greatly improved. So the Arnie Facility and Finance Committee members include Washington County Commissioner Wayne Johnson as Chair, Commissioners Fretham and Commissioners Maticastile as members from Ramsey County. The first change was, again, adding an opportunity for the Arnie Board to review and provide input on budget objectives back in April. Again, the second change is what brought us here today, to allow both county boards to host a workshop to discuss joint activities funding prior to the process moving forward. Note that the 2023 budget will go before the Arnie Board for approval at its July board meeting. And the 2023 joint activities budget will go before the two county boards in August or September for their approval. And I will now turn it over to my colleague today, Eden Frank, Interim Environmental Health Director, to provide an overview of Ramsey, Washington, and Arnie staff involvement with joint activities.
Could I, Madam Chair?
Yeah?
Okay, it says July 21st.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did I read it wrong? It says it adopts the budget on July 21st,
Oh.
but that's NACO.
Madam Chair,
That's-
Commissioner,
We did update that.
we did update. My apologies. It is, that meeting is scheduled for July 28th.
Okay,
We understood that conflict existed, so my apologies.
yep, that's where I've got it. I was just like, wait.
Calendar. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners, County Manager. I'm very pleased to be here, so thank you for having us. And I am going to go over the org chart. How thrilling. But it is actually very interesting. And I'll first go over the environmental health org chart and then how that connects to the recycling and energy org chart, and how that, go back though, and how that connects to the joint activities. So, yes, no, stop pushing. I don't want to touch that. I'll surely make something go. We don't know where it'll go. So, and as Sarah eloquently explained in the introduction, and it's probably nobody's surprised who knows Zach Hansen. It took two people to replace him. Could possibly be more, but Michael and I are sharing the responsibility that used to be held by Zach Hansen. So Michael Reed is responsible for the recycling and energy division portion of it, which the next slide will show. And then I'm responsible for the internal county operations. So as you can see from the org chart, there are 8 units, 8 supervisors that report to me, including myself. I report to myself. So as you can see there, I'm on the planning and policy supervisor, as I'm the interim director at this point. So of those 8 units, all of them are involved in solid waste management master plan strategies, and Sam Hansen will be elaborating about that further on in the presentation. But basically, everybody in the division, in some way or another, touches solid waste management master plan strategies, which joint activities is part of. As far as the joint activities, there are, if not all, almost all of the 8 units are represented in staff totaling about 20. So if I had a highlighter, I could actually highlight the names, but there are 20 plus staff on that org chart who are integrally involved in the joint activities, either from a few hours a month to 30 plus hours a week, depending on their responsibilities in the project. Next slide, please. Am I supposed to do it myself?
I got you.
Oh, you got me. Thank you. Oh my gosh, I don't want to touch that. So here is the, so that extension, the one arm extension at the, on the other side, the right side, Michael Reed. Then this is the org chart for the recycling and energy, and specifically joint activities. But you can see on the top left, there's 5 of you, Ramsey County Board Commissioners, in combination with 4 Washington County commissioners, then form the Recycling and Energy Board, which most of you are familiar with that, which then oversees the activities of the Joint Leadership Team, which is Michael Reed, as you know, Renee Voigt from Ramsey County also, and then Nikki Stewart from Washington County. And then that team oversees the 6 program areas that you see below there, including Sam Hansen, the Joint Activities Manager on the right side, who oversees an additional 7 or 8 staff who are, the work that they do is the joint activities, so really the focus of the budget. And one of the things that I love to say is that budgets tell the story in numbers. And so sometimes people get really like, oh, we're going to hear about the budget. And I get really excited because I'm like, this is the story behind the budget. You know, this is the story in the numbers. So that, and you'll hear more numbers later. But so there's also an additional 7 or 8 staff, R&E staff, administrative staff, contract managers, et cetera, who are involved in joint activities. So there's a total of about 15 staff within the R&E that are involved with joint activities. You add that to the 20-plus staff from Ramsey County, you're at about 35 staff. And then in addition, Washington County has staff involved too with joint activities. So as you can see, it's a very lot of people involved and a lot of hands touching this work. I will turn it over to, I think, Sam now. You get to hear specifically about.
Ray, do you have a question?
Yes. So is this Ramsey and Washington County or just Ramsey County staff?
This is recycling and energy staff. So
Okay, so
except for Renee and Michael, who work for Ramsey County, and Nikki Stewart, who works for Washington County, the rest of those staff are actually R&E staff.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Good question.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, thank you for having us here today to talk about joint activities. My name is Sam Hansen. I'm the Joint Activities Manager for Ramsey Washington Recycling and Energy, and I'm here today to give a brief overview of R&E's joint activities, starting with just a little bit of a background. I know this is familiar for most of you, but as you're all probably aware, Minnesota has a waste management hierarchy that's seen on the screen here. That prioritizes waste management activities based on environmental impacts. And this hierarchy is a helpful guide for counties to use to develop various programs and strategies that will address waste issues that we see in our integrated system. This includes all types of waste, from household hazardous waste down to common recyclables like bottles and cans. And the hierarchy really helps county staff prioritize efforts by emphasizing the importance of things like waste reduction, reuse over traditional disposal. And this prioritization really plays an important role in developing the county's solid waste management master plans, which are seen here. And these plans are really critical in guiding the critical guiding documents that lay out the county strategy for addressing all solid waste. The plans are the basis for any program or activity that will be implemented in the county related to solid waste. For Ramsey and Washington counties, their solid waste plans were written in a coordinated way to capitalize on that long-standing partnership between the two counties. And doing this allows us to capitalize on many shared priorities that both have collectively in the plan. And those shared priorities are then worked on collaboratively, leading to more consistent programming across the two counties and hopefully providing much larger impacts and results because of that. And this is where R&E comes in. So R&E is where the collaboration really happens. Any shared priority that both counties have in their waste plans can serve as the basis for what we call joint activities. And these joint activities are designed and implemented collaboratively with staff from both counties and R&E, just as Jay was explaining. Using staff from both counties and R&E, plus using funding from the R&E joint activities budget. So referring back to the waste hierarchy from the last slide, joint activities is where both counties really prioritize a lot of that work that's higher up on the hierarchy. So things like waste reduction or waste prevention, reuse, and also recycling. And the goal for joint activities is really to get the materials to the right place at the right time to maximize the value of that material. And when we do that successfully, fewer materials arrive at the R&E Center in Newport because those materials are being addressed in a more appropriate way higher up on the hierarchy. So what are our joint activities? There's a lot. The current budget, which is a 2-year budget that goes through the end of next year, so 2020, includes 13 different program areas and activities that address a variety of shared waste plan strategies. These programs offer many resources, including expert technical assistance, a variety of financial incentives, all to help facilitate the process of getting materials to the right place at the right time, which increases our efficiency at the R&D Center and reduces the overall amount of waste produced in both counties. All of these programs are designed to be collaborative, and they're implemented by over 30, probably over 40 staff at this point between both counties and R&E working together. So the list on the screen shows some of our current joint activities, not all of them. And for the interest of time, I'm not going to talk about each of them individually, but instead just wanted to highlight a few kind of categories that we can put some of these different strategies within. One category that's clear is a business-focused program or area of programs, and this would include biz recycling, the business pollution prevention program, and others that really target the commercial sector and provide businesses with free technical and financial resources that will help them better manage their waste while also lowering their environmental impact. On the other side of that, we have several programs that are designed to address waste at the residential level, things like the multi-unit residential recycling program, our mattress recycling efforts, and a lot of our community engagement and educational work is focused on getting residents the tools they need to waste less and recycle more. And then finally, the third category that I'd like to highlight is our work on food waste, which is a large and important category and is one of the largest categories of waste that we still see in the solid waste system. And these efforts cross across commercial and residential to address food waste in a more holistic way. So following that waste hierarchy, again, we have several efforts high up on the hierarchy trying to prevent food from being wasted. And this would include food recovery efforts, trying to get surplus food or excess food to people being disposed of. And then for food scraps that need to be disposed of, we are developing the food scrap pickup program, which we'll share a little bit more about in a minute. And that will be a new program. It's still in development and will be a free option to any resident who wants to recycle their food. Really exciting. And then following that, on the back end of the whole system, we're also working to develop finished compost markets. So as we produce more food scraps and it gets composted, also making sure there's a demand for that finished product. So then we have kind of a full system that we're supporting. So these are just a few examples, certainly not covering all of the various joint activities that we work on. But implementing these efforts collaboratively between both counties and R&E is our best option for addressing solid waste plan strategies that may otherwise go unaddressed, and for meeting waste and recycling goals that are aggressive and set by the state. Successful joint activities will result in communities that are more engaged in the waste management system, and this in turn means that waste materials go to the best possible place so that their value can be captured and retained, resulting in less waste being produced, processed, and disposed of through waste to energy and landfilling. So with that, I believe I'll turn it back to Michael. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, any questions for Sam? Right. All right. Next slide, just a sample, not taking a deep dive, but just focusing on the climate mitigation contributions of our joint activities strategies. The food scrap bag program, just by reducing food waste, 20% of the waste stream is comprised of food waste, and it represents a greenhouse gas reduction from those materials ending up in landfills. And while we are processing 450,000 tons per year at recycling and energy facilities, the heavier fraction, the residue ends up getting landfilled, and a good portion of that is organic material. So we're reducing the amount of organic material going to landfills, and that's being redirected to composting and ultimately anaerobic digestion. With biz recycling and a multi-unit recycling, we're increasing access to recycling, providing opportunities to redirect those resources from the waste stream and thereby reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the disposal side, but also saving energy on the recycling side. It's far more energy efficient to recycle a lot of these materials versus creating them from virgin materials in the first place. The food waste prevention is looking at the whole system, food production, the transportation, handling, all of this. And if we can find a use for food waste or food before it becomes waste, then we're solving a a number of different problems there. We've got definitely a need in our community for food. Many people are going hungry, and it's also keeping it out of the disposal stream. In our business pollution prevention program, we're reducing pollution at the source by focusing on air emissions, which contribute to as a health problem for people in certain communities. It's also the Twin Cities is on the verge of being a non-attainment zone per EPA standards, and there's significant impacts economically to the community if that's imposed. So this is an opportunity for us to go in there and work with businesses to try to reduce solvent use and reducing their emissions, which has a potential to reduce their hazardous waste generation and the liability and costs associated with that as well. So there's many different benefits. So this chart here is just some small font, but I'll just point that I wanted to make is these are pointing out major sectors in our economy that are contributing to greenhouse gases, and this is a graph from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency going back to 2018 data, but they've identified transportation, electricity generation, ag, forestry, and land use, and other industrial, residential sources, commercial sources, and then waste at the very bottom of this table is still a contributor, but it's in the grand scheme of things, it's far less impactful than some of these other sources, but yet we're doing everything we can to try to reduce that footprint even further.
Oh, thanks. Could you explain the green? I'm curious. It looks like it's both going down and up in crop agriculture.
Madam Chair, Commissioner,
Oil
I'm
and
not sure if I
crop
understand the question.
agriculture. Okay, I'm looking at that green, and I see there's oil on one side
Mm-hmm.
and crop agriculture on the other. I didn't catch that before.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I'm not sure what that contribution is. I think it is focusing on just the oil as it relates to consumption with the agricultural sector.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Carter, I think, so it's the oil in fertilizers part, I think, what shows up there, but I think the reason it goes negative is there are certain parts of crops that actually pull carbon from the air, right? So that it's on net, there's a lot more that goes into it as a carbon-intensive activity, but it's not all on one side of the ledger,
Got
which
it.
is different than most of the other sectors I think you're looking at. Forestry piece, probably, actually.
Gotcha.
So how does the benefits of the Joint Activities Upstream Solutions deliver benefits to the residents and businesses of Ramsey County? From an environmental perspective, Upstream Solutions offer higher uses of waste resources. It assigns producer responsibility and provides a closed-loop system. Examples of that are Minnesota Paint Care and some other product stewardship initiatives that we are trying to promote through the legislature. We were not successful this time around, but we continue to work on that. But steps to promote a circular economy so that there's, if you're creating a waste, you've got an outlet for it, and you've also got a way to manage it that contributes back into the economy, typically through a recycling loop, closed loop system. We're continually looking for opportunities to reduce the carbon footprint, and we're doing this through the policies that we've laid out as far as strategies in the Solid Waste Master Plan. As far as environmental, we're continuing to look for upstream solutions, and within that, higher use of waste resources. And I'm sorry, I got off here a little bit, but it's move over here to race and health equity. So many of our programs are accessible to all the residents in Ramsey County, and in many cases, all the businesses at no added cost. So, a number of communities, if you want to opt into an organics, a curbside food scrap recycling program, you might have to pay extra. With the program that we've got in motion, any residents in Ramsey and Washington County can participate at no additional cost. As far as our grant programs, they're there for businesses, and there's equal access to all businesses to pursue those grant resources. In terms of economic benefits, we're offering resources through grants and technical assistance for businesses to more cost-effectively manage their waste resources. And financially, if we can reduce the amount of waste and help businesses do so, that's reducing their long-term liability. I worked in solid and hazardous waste regulation for many years, and there's certainly cradle-to-grave liability, and if we can help businesses reduce the amount of hazardous waste that they're generating, then that's going to reduce their long-term liability. And we're not kicking the can down the road. We're not deferring the costs to future generations. We feel that we've got full cost accounting with our current system, whereas based on examples from the past, with what got us into waste energy in the first place with the Lake Chain landfill, we feel this is full cost accounting. We feel that landfilling may be kicking the can down the road, and future generations are having to pick up the cost for that. This is the joint activities budget. This process started in early 2021, and perhaps naively we thought that the pandemic would treat us better than it did when we were putting this budget together. But this is year 2 of a 2-year budget, and there's an opportunity in the process for the R&E board to amend the budget in year 2. And I wanted to point out, 2023 approved and 2023 proposed. And so we are suggesting some amendments to this budget, and I'll explain those here. As far as non-residential recycling, this is on the upper right column here. We're proposing to reduce that around business pollution prevention grants. One thing we found is that we're working with environmental initiative to engage businesses in business pollution prevention grants, which is looking at dry cleaners, body shops, and looking at helping them get out of use of perchloroethylene. And I'm pleased to say that Ramsey County is down to 2 dry cleaners that are using perchloroethylene countywide. It used to be probably a dozen many years ago. In Washington County is at 0. So we're pleased that we're making progress in that direction. And as far as body shops, this used to be my day job, but with hazardous waste regulation. But the body shops, we're trying to encourage them to consider a water-based paint. You've got the base coat and the clear coat over that, and the base coat can utilize a water-based product, and the clear coat still is solvent-based. But if body shops move in that direction, they greatly reduce the amount of solvent that they're using and the amount of hazardous waste that requires disposal on the back end, and the emissions into the neighborhood.
I'm just curious, I want to go back to the dry cleaners. Why do we have 2, I mean, was this a mandate? Well, it must not have been, otherwise we wouldn't have 2 that still use it. And are they trying to do something different, or what's the deal with the 2?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, those are good questions. Both dry cleaners have been engaged in this discussion, and for their business reasons, they have chosen not to move in this direction. I'm not sure if what their long-term business plans are, and that might play into their decision. But I believe that there's a mandate at the state level in 2025 that dry cleaners have to move away from chloroethylene. So we are just trying to move that timeline up.
And if residents wanted to know which dry cleaners that hadn't, or that had already gone to whatever it's called.
Perchloroethylene.
Yeah, that's easy for you to say, because you've been practicing. Anyway, is that something that's on our website or not? I mean, not that it would have to be, I'm just curious.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, we haven't posted that yet. We certainly encourage residents when they're going to a dry cleaner to ask what solvents are being used.
Okay.
To raise awareness. And that would also signal to the businesses that are still using PERC, for short, that, the customers are definitely interested in alternatives. Second item here is $170,000 under Community Waste Solutions, and this is, we still have funding in these line items, but it represents a reduction in the community resource hubs in Ramsey and Washington County, and reduction in looking at bulky waste solutions. And the community resource hubs, part of this is looking at a location. It's also looking at staffing. If this moves forward, we would be looking at additional staff, either reassigning staff within, environmental health or hiring additional staff. But this program concept is still in motion, and being, evaluated in the context of the greater space allocation, discussions taking place across various county departments, including public health. Bulky waste solutions, bulky waste coming down to the plant is, deemed non-processable, and we're continually looking for upstream opportunities to work with businesses that deliver what we call bulky waste, and seeing what we can do to try to make that material more processable. So those strategies are still in motion. We just don't anticipate spending the full amount on that line item. And the next item is looking at a reduction in reuse and repair of still hosting those programs, but we anticipate, because we haven't been hosting repair or fix-it clinics thus far this year due to the pandemic, that we could reduce that line item by $20,000. And the $210,000 up here in the upper right corner represents staff cost for bringing 2 additional staff in to recycling and energy, so a program planner, and also a program assistant to help us continue the joint activities across the different programs.
Madam Chair, and are they, it's my understanding that they have a focus specifically on climate change, is that accurate?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, that we do have one staff person in environmental health that is focusing on climate change, and there's certainly a component of that within our work with R&E, but that's not the prime focus of the individuals. So as far as recapping the budget background here, this is known as the general fund or the government fund. Again, funded by county contributions, 73% coming from Ramsey County. These programs align with both the county's waste management plans, as Sam Hansen discussed, and it's driven by recycling and energy's vision and mission. The joint work is intended to meet state and county goals, including the 75% recycling rate by 2030. And already board bylaws provided the Facility and Finance Committee prepare the joint activities budget. So some of this is reviewing some of the previous information, but as far as the 2023 budget recommendation, the Facility and Finance Committee has reviewed these details already. The proposed changes to the 2023 joint activities budget includes that additional planning specialist full-time equivalent intended to support planning and project management for R&E in the implementation of new efforts in the current 2022 and 2023 budget and into the future. And the other FTE is a program assistant supporting current R&E programs such as the food scraps pickup program. Staffing needs have expanded as R&E joint activities continue to evolve to meet program commitments.
Thank you. It's heartening to see in slides before the changes that you made to the process, and also the sharing of joint activities per the Ramsey Washington County formula. And board members who have been meeting can address this. Is there any concern that you know of that may occur coming back from these board workshops in the sharing of joint activities? I remember a few years ago, we had the concern and the splitting out of certain activities that Washington County was not supporting, and we moved ahead. So it appears as though that's all come back together here. Could there be any concern or thoughts for splitting out of activities?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, that is a good question. I believe that in 2021, Ramsey County decided to fund a number of the joint activities, and we call that Ramsey County only programs. Washington County had directed money that was a savings from discontinuing the rebate, and they focused that on their environmental service center. I believe that we're going to find out, further feedback from the Washington County Board today after the workshop, but it's my anticipation that we are in this together moving forward.
And I think we could probably save that broader discussion till at the end of the conversation and keep questions focused just on clarifying information.
Sure.
Clarifying question?
Just that, what he said.
What he said.
No, I mean, when they made the decision to pull some of those funds to the Environmental Service Center, they also made a commitment to come back as a full partner. And that was last year, for this year.
Okay.
And they did, that's when we changed the process so that they were more aware of it.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
Some of the backdrop with our challenges with joint activities, in the last 2 years, we've been dealing with the pandemic, and this has disrupted businesses significantly. Early on, businesses were shuttered. We didn't know what was safe, what wasn't safe. Face-to-face meetings with our consultants, going out to meet with them to offer technical assistance was not welcomed. Businesses were reluctant to make investments during uncertain times, and now we've got additional uncertain times with inflation and economic uncertainties. And many county staff in Ramsey and Washington counties were reassigned with the COVID responsibilities. And during that time, the R&E joint activity staff were heavily tasked with a lot of the work that the county staff were contributing to because they were no longer available. So we were trying to do everything we could to continue the joint activities efforts with just far fewer staff during that time. The good news is that many of the county staff have returned to their role in Washington County in public health and environment and in environmental health in our office. So that's definitely a positive. Another priority for us right now, as all of you are aware, is our food scrap bag program, and we're going to be rolling this out to 800,000 residents. This is the largest program of its kind that we've had any involvement with, and specific to this program, this is maybe one of the largest programs like this in the country. So this is uncharted territory for us, and we're very excited about it. But with that in mind, we're learning as we go and making sure we've got enough staff resources allocated to it, because this is so big, we got to get it right. So the commissioners on the R&E board have seen this slide before, and this was one of the discussions that came up this year with how joint activities fund balance relates to the facility budget. And this year we've definitely encountered a very challenging time on the facility budget side, due in large part to the transportation increase in transportation costs due to fuel. Also, our insurance costs have gone up significantly. Our transload costs to transport waste from the transfer stations down to the R&E facility have increased as well. And there's been many labor challenges within those contracted trucking firms. They don't have enough drivers, and that's been disruptive to operations on our side. So we're doing everything we can to navigate that, but part of that is increasing costs for them to pay their contracted drivers additional amounts of money to keep them behind the wheel. And insurance costs have gone up significantly as well. So those are all items that are unanticipated, between inflation and international unrest and how that's impacted so many of the commodities that we rely on, and namely fuel. So in 2018, next slide here. Let me start out here. As the joint leadership team works with staff to prepare budgets for committee and board consideration, we are reminded of commissioner concerns with increasing the tip fee at the R&E Center and impacts to households and businesses. For example, last summer when the board was approving the 2022-2023 budget, the facility budget was impacted by the increased cost of property insurance and the start of the recycling and food scrap bag recovery line. There were a couple of options to address those increased costs of the facility budget, such as higher tip fees or increasing tip fees, or a one-time use of joint activities surplus to minimize the tip fee percent increase. Keep in mind that we receive 450,000 tons of waste at the facility every year. If we increase the tip fee by $1, that represents $450,000 of increased revenue for us. And as far as if we allocate overhead to the facility and decrease joint activities funding, but then increase the tip fee, this is a subject that requires policy direction from the R&E board. You know, we need to discuss the impact of that across the multiple budgets, and the strategy of moving away from the current policy that was adopted in 2018 of allowing joint activities fund balance to be moved over provides us less control in stabilizing the tipping fee. So again, keep in mind that the joint activities fund is the general fund. The fund balance originated with the Resource Recovery Project Board and was adopted by R&E. And I mentioned earlier the policy in 2018. The policy was revised and approved by the R&E board. It allows for joint activities fund balance to remain at 20 to 35% of the subsequent year's budget if there's fund balance. And if the fund balance exceeds 35%, excess funds are able to be transferred to the equipment maintenance and repair budget, the EM&R budget, which is a subset of the facility budget. And the surplus directed to the EM&R, equipment maintenance and repair fund, is there to avoid deferring maintenance and to maintaining a rolling 5-year capital improvement plan for equipment and maintenance. The background on that, if you recall, we purchased a very tired facility from RRT, and RRT was interested in managing that asset to the end of the contract, which was their primary focus. Is generating revenue. When we purchased the facility, we had many trailers that were non-functional. There was a lot of deferred maintenance that needed to be taken care of, and we needed to shore up all of that so that we could take care of any unexpected maintenance and also get into a preventative maintenance mode where we were on top of items before they presented operational problems. So one other important point here is that the EM&R budget currently is funded primarily by recycling revenues, and commodity prices for ferrous and aluminum is currently very, very high, and these are good times as far as those go. But for those of you that have tracked those commodity prices over time, they are up and down over the years, and so right now it's a revenue source. You know, in subsequent years it could be significantly less.
Yeah, and to help me understand, and I don't sit on, and I never have. I'm not sure I'm looking
whole
to.
workshop is for you.
I have attended though, as an alternate, but so help me understand why the equipment maintenance and replacement budget wouldn't be a part of the tipping fees, because that's what is used to maintain it versus us using recycling fees to cover equipment for the facility that manages our waste, and why that wouldn't just come out of the tipping fees.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, many of these decisions were made prior to my involvement, and it's my understanding that we were looking to provide certainty with the different funding sources, and you know, the recycling revenues are rolling into the EM&R budget, but it's an uncertain revenue source. So that only serves to shore up the EM&R budget.
Well, I guess my point is, though, I mean, this is, I don't know if it's called an enterprise fund, but I mean, you would hope the facility, the tipping fees would cover the operations, the maintenance, the long-term capital investment for this site. But we're pulling in a undependable fund, as you say, of recycling fees, which, from my perspective, should go to help support recycling versus equipment replacement and maintenance at a facility that's serving, refuge and waste, and it should be covered under. So it's not, I guess, to me, seems like an inconsistent policy here where we're using recycling fees to cover and support a facility that should be standing alone on tipping fees.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
County. Yeah, that's a good question. So when the policy was developed, we wanted to have a sort of a stable
tipping fee, so to speak. The, purchases in the EM&R, like the rotors, are 300,000. So we budget those every 2 to 3 years. So in order to stabilize the tipping fee, we developed the EM&R budget, set aside, so it's a separate budget based on recycling revenues, not part of the tipping fee.
And I guess this is more for the policy setters who make this, not for the people that own and operate, because you can only do it under the way the policy setters set it. But to me, I mean, in this, I'll have some comments at the end, kind of the bigger picture, but, you know, this is one thing that's standing out to me here that's inconsistent with our goals here, where we're kind of like taking from Peter for recycling fees that should help support an increased cycling, which is up here on the continuum, right? And it's helping pay for and subsidize waste energy, which is like just a hair above landfills on this side. And then it's also artificially keeping the tipping fees down, which in the end affects the users who are creating the trash that we're burning, where if they were paying the real cost, maybe they'd pay more attention to what they put in the trash. So it just seems to me like there's some inconsistencies here with how we're funding things to actually accomplish our goals along the continuum, taking from higher up in the continuum to subsidize lower down in the continuum, which provides less incentive for the payers to actually pay attention to what they're putting into the stream.
Well, part of this, though, is that it is no longer just a solid waste processing facility. That's what it was, and it was heavily subsidized to the haulers to the tune of, was it $15 a ton or something? It was ridiculous. But we had to do that at the time because there were all kinds of other things going on. But the transition, when we took it over and turned it into, yes, it does solid waste, but we do, and now we're investing more and more in recycling equipment and all of that. So if it was just taking recycling revenues and putting it into the waste side, that's one thing. But it's not just putting it into the waste side. It is putting it in fact, a significant amount is going into the recycling side because that's what we've just invested in. And so it is going in to make sure that the recyclables that we get in the system, and it's going to become more once we have that line operational where it's a pick, you know, you put your recyclables into a bag and you pull that out. Right now we're doing the organics, and it's doing it that way. So the significant cost increase that we've had has been on the recycling side and the processing of it.
Yeah, be interesting to see the breakdown, because the example you gave of the $300,000 piece of equipment is on the waste side.
It is?
Not on the recycling side, right?
It is equipment for the facility. So
Okay.
it's processing the waste.
Okay, but there's processing, right now, the way it comes in, we have to pull it out of the waste, so it doesn't come in as a recycling stream. We pull the recyclables out of it. And so this equipment helps to pull the recyclables out of it, and then the rest of it goes and gets chopped up.
Yeah, I'll hold my comments later. I just wanted to make a point here that there's some inconsistencies with our policy and how we lay things out with how we're funding things.
And we can discuss more, but I think there's a point to Commissioner Reinhardt's point that equipment doesn't necessarily mean it's waste. It could be the very equipment that we use to pull out the recycling that gets us recycling.
And we have partners in this.
Well, that's gonna be my bigger
So,
piece here.
yeah. That part.
So, the approved tipping fee, is currently $87 in 2022, and it will increase in 2023 to $99. And the Army does not need to tap into, well, let me back up. Well, without the use of the fund balance, the joint activities fund balance, the 2023 tipping fee would need to increase an additional $4 a ton to $103 a ton. Again, if we did not use joint activities fund balance to solve the facility deficit in 2022. R&E does not need to tap into the operating reserve fund or the enterprise reserve fund. And, the operating reserve fund was set up originally with contributions from both Ramsey and Washington County to provide capital to R&E for any unforeseen, situations that might come up. We couldn't afford to have any significant operational disruptions, so both Ramsey and Washington County, contributed, the money to fund the operating reserve fund. And under the operating reserve fund, that's to be paid back to Ramsey and Washington County, starting, 2024 through 2028. At the same time, the enterprise reserve fund is being built up, to provide, again, that fund if there's any problems that come up, beyond the contingency that we've got in the facility budget. And the joint activities fund balance remains at 35% moving forward. If there is interest in moving toward a true enterprise fund, it's staff's recommendation that this occur at R&E, as R&E matures and reserve funding reaches recommended funding levels. And these are all policy questions for the R&E board to discuss, and further to your point, Commissioner. And let me go back one. When we, I think at that, I'd like to open it up to any further questions or discussion.
McDonough?
Jump in. So, and this is for my colleagues, not necessarily for you, and because, you know, I mentioned I haven't been on it, but also there's a advantage, right? I'm arm's length away here. This has been a complicated thing for a long time. And we get really close, right? And then we have a lot of ownership about how things get developed. But at what point do we step back and say, you know what, this is the right thing for us, and it really aligns with our values? It's not holding us back. It's not pulling us off in a way that, you know, we could do things differently if we would have developed something on our own without partners putting stress on us or pressures on us to go this way or go this way for these reasons, right? I think, you know, Washington County's decision to pull the money out to build their facility kind of highlighted that, right? Or, you know, if we're getting pressure to take recycling funds and, you know, invest them into burner funds where they're there, is it pulling us off of achieving our goals faster or stronger or meeting the needs? Again, you know, that last slide, you know, $104 versus $99. We're subsidizing frustrates me that we're using dollars that would hope to actually get us up the stream to actually fund, you know, the thing like right at the bottom, whether it's going into the landfill or to the burner. So, you know, for this group, at what point do we actually step back and get up on the balcony and say, is this the right model for us to move forward? We're doing this in so many areas, right? Corrections, you know, transportation, and all these other areas that, you know, we've built up as a system in this county over years. And, you know, it worked, and people with good intentions did it. But, you know, we've been able to step back and really take a hard look at it. Is this really the path that's going to get us to that future, you know, as quick as we want to get there, or in a way we want to get there? Or are we putting too much effort into helping bring along maybe an unwilling partner or a partner that's pulling us off the mission? And I'm not being critical of this by one. I'm throwing out some questions to all of us about how do we evaluate that to make sure we're doing the best we can with what we got to get to where we want to go.
Reinhardt, and then Commissioner Madison.
Well, and I think that is exactly what the Recycling and Energy Board is all about. I mean, we are questioning everything as we go along, but when we got this facility, you know, that was a big leap for us. And the fact of the matter is, when we went into it, I mean, the previous owners didn't even allow us to come in to see how much maintenance needed to be done. I mean, they sold it to us, and the day that they sold it to us was the first time we were able to actually go in there and really assess things, which was kind of crazy. But regardless, the staff did a fantastic job, and even working with the union contracts that are there, we made a commitment to do this right. The issue, of course, was the tipping fee, and it wasn't where it should be. And, of course, we weren't getting anything out of that to reinvest. They didn't reinvest it. They just took the money and ran. Simply, anyway. But, so we made a deliberate long-term decision on how we were going to change what came into that facility, how we handled it, and tried to move forward, everything from the odor to the composting and anaerobic digestion, and looking at gasification. These are all things that are still in the pipeline for us. And the food scraps and that program, it doesn't sound like it would be that expensive, but it is. The equipment, we got some money from the state, not a lot, but we got some, I think $7 million, was it, that we got from the state to put that in, is the money that comes in with the tipping fee does all of it. It doesn't just do the waste part, and that's not necessarily easy to understand because of the only thing it did before was waste. I mean, it pulled out a few recyclables, big deal. I mean, it was next to nothing. We have another line that's coming in that is going to do the same thing with recyclables, and I can't remember how many more tons. I did at the time we were taking the governor around and stuff, but I mean, we're talking massively more of the recyclables. Now, should people be pulling those out? Well, they will pull them out, and put them into a separate bag so that it can be pulled out, I believe is how it's going to work, but I'm not sure on that one. But it is going to pull the recyclables out and sort it without having hand picking. If you've ever been to a place that did hand picking, oh my God. I mean, it's whatever the cost, it's better for everybody. And so the anaerobic digestion, I mean, that wasn't something that was even considered there before, but there's a cost associated with it. When we go to gasification, and we're getting closer to that, so that we have less and less going into a landfill, it's still being processed. But it's not going to a landfill, and that's what we need to really concentrate on. It's also not going to be going into a burner, because I think the contract right now with Xcel Energy is till 2027. And so we're going to stop burning, basically, and try to minimize what we go into a landfill. And all of the things that we're doing along the way here are to achieve that. So the goals are good. The funding of it, we had to really scramble, especially in the early years, because as I said, we subsidized the tipping fee a lot, and it truly wasn't the cost. And folks didn't understand how much it costs to recycle, nor how much it costs to landfill or burn. And so we have been trying to level that out. And the recycling funds that come in, we don't know exactly what they're going to be, because that all depends on the market. Sometimes it's a negative. We've had that in the past. But that's realistically is a pretty small part of what we need to do in our overall budget, because we don't really rely on those. That's one of the issues with it. Sam is shaking his head. And so it is a complicated budget, but it's not as simple as, okay, the tipping fee. At this point, the tipping fee comes pretty close to covering all the costs, but it's not quite there yet. And one of the reasons for that was we're going from 87 to 99. We're trying to make it so that we can bring it up, not all at one time. And we've got the fees that are associated with the garbage bills, and Washington and Ramsey County handle that differently. So I understand if you thought that all of that, it sounds like it's both $1 million or whatever, but anyhow, all of the recycling money coming in, the revenue coming in, it is going towards recycling. And we do a lot with education and prevention, and that's a lot of the stuff that the grant programs that we have, because that's up to individuals and businesses to do. So I'm not trying to, I mean, what you're saying is important, and I get that. But I want you to know that I think that the Recycling and Energy Board and the commissioners on there are on top of it and trying to do the best that they can. So it's not at 104, which is the full cost. It's at 99. But we're trying to make sure that we get what we need, to really make it work economically and environmentally, or environmentally and economically, depending on how you view it. But some of the things that we're doing right now, where the investments that we are making, those are environmental, that cost money.
Yeah, I just want to say, Jim, I think your comment is super well made and super well taken. I mean, the whole reason we are having this workshop is because we are all really close to it and we're in it. And we said we need to bring this back to our full board so others could be engaged and see the numbers. And you know, there's a balance. We have policy differences with the partner that we have. And that's not to say we don't want to partner, because it's working well, but we are moving them along, and this tipping fee becomes an often contentious point. But we knew we couldn't do it alone at the time that we got into it, and so now we're bringing them along. And I'll say we've made really big progress in that in the last, I would say, just 2 or 3 years. There's been a real direct shift, and I think we'll see that even more potentially after the November elections, hopefully. But I do think your point's well made, and that's the whole reason we came. Say, like, what are you seeing that we don't see? And I agree with you. You know, we, policy-wise, and money needs to be lined up, and what we're spending on what. I also think there's some more education on recycling that happens, and, you know, this is my own education, but recycling's not actually recycling unless there's someone buying that particular waste. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to depend on it. So people are like, well, I separated it, so I did my part, I feel good, but actually we need everyone to stop wasting to begin with, no matter what container you put it in, because that's the real cost. And it's really about the reduce has to be like a big emphasis, and then way down here is recycle and then trash, because that's the huge cost and what we actually can gain. And so, you know, in the weeds of, are we using recycling money and not incentivizing people to recycle, it's like, what do we do to incentivize? And I'm with you, higher tipping fees or higher fees in trash will get people potentially to, you know, not have as much trash, or it might be that they're putting the trash in places it's not supposed to. So there's also that balance and how you incentivize the reduction piece of it versus the, you know, what are you doing with it?
Just real quick, if I
Yeah.
could, I want to hear what everybody else says. I wasn't necessarily suggesting recycling fees need to just fund recycling efforts.
Right.
It should go to fund higher up on the continuum
Yeah.
and not lower down.
Got it. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, yep, we totally agree.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thanks. Because I don't sit super close to this either, actually. So I'm going to follow a similar piece a little bit. And I will say on your last point, Commissioner Montes-Castillo, the same hierarchy here should guide some of our work around climate mitigation, because it's, you can buy all the electrification to your fleet as you want, but not buying the vehicle is still a better carbon,
Right.
you know, activity than buying an extra car if you don't need it.
Right.
And I just think that, but it's not as flashy always, right? And I appreciate that part of this. This work here helps us, informs us in that space.
Mm-hmm.
My question is actually back towards Sarah and Michael maybe, but it's along a similar question. There's kind of 2 ways policy and strategy come in here, right? First, I want to commend this is really good work, and it can be nervous sitting in this seat sometimes when you wait till budget time of the year and you're getting numbers and you're not close to it. So I want to appreciate everybody's work on it, Renee online too. One way is, you know, you heard this part here today, the conversation about how commissioners work with the Washington County commissioners to maintain a fidelity to a direction. Let me take it the other way then, which is we work here at this table with this board to set strategic directions, which we then carry out through like your department, right? How do you make sure through the work that you do with Michael and the rest of the team, like how do we ensure that we stay fidelity to the strategy of Ramsey County in those spaces? I'm just kind of curious if you could expound on that for a second with whatever your thoughts might be from like your public health seat and maybe from then where you sit as a division director.
Yeah, I'll take it a step deeper. I think we also have to keep fidelity with our goal as a public health department too, and the mandates and laws that we're responsible to and the community we're responsible to on a day-to-day basis. And environmental health and R&E are a part of that continuum, right? And the work that we're doing to maintain wellness and safety and health in our community. And so I would say one thing that I've been very impressed by with R&E and environmental health is really making sure that we're aligned with the Ramsey County strategic priorities and goals. And so I think around opportunity, just the alignment with the work in the budget and making sure that we are, I think, to Commissioner McDonough's point, looking at behavior change, looking at a residents first focus, and how do we embed that more and more into the fabric of what we're doing, not only in public health, but with the recycling and energy facility and the board, but also with environmental health. And so I think the food scrap bag, which you were going to talk about program, is one demonstration of that, of how we can assist community working upstream. Sam talked about that hierarchy, and reducing waste and increasing, our energy efficiency. But I do think that I'm seeing more and more alignment with our strategic priorities and our goals as a county. And I think once we integrate that, along with the work that we've done around race equity, the things that Michael lifted up earlier, I think we're going to see more and more of that cross-collaboration and hopefully building and expounding on the opportunity to partner, not only with from within, but with Washington County. So I'll yield to Michael.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Commissioners, City Manager, to your point, we have our master plan, and what happens next year is the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency issues their policy plan, and then we have the opportunity to react to that. How are we going to meet those strategies? And that's where our master plan strategies come into play. And it's on us, it's on Ray and her team and me, and in collaboration with R&E and also Washington County, to make sure that those strategies that we put in place are true to the fidelity of Ramsey County's goals, and that those master plan goals are brought before the board for your input and adoption as well. So that's our opportunity. That's, a 5-year check-in, but that's our opportunity to assure alignment.
I just wanted to add to this, because it's a really good question, but there's, one really good example is the last time we did this budget, and Washington County said they were gonna pull some fees out to go reopen their yard waste sites, right? But they had once closed, sorry, that's snarky. But we said, as a county, like, no, we're gonna keep doing this work, and we're gonna do it, and it becomes Ramsey County only. And Sam and his team have gone really deep to say, well, we have our own values at Ramsey County, and we're going to do that regardless of whether our partner is at the same table. And I think that's a really good example. And then in turn, they see the good work we're doing, and they're like, oh, I want to be part of that, right? So hence we're bringing them along. But it's the, how we're doing the organic waste collection, that it's free to every resident, that we're focused on racial equity, and even in this work around trash and recycling and organics and all of that stuff, it is to our values, and so we're leading by that example. And we never said we're pulling our part out because they did. We're like, all right, eventually we're gonna outshine you, and then y'all will be embarrassed, and it's a regional process.
Madam Chair, just a final piece on that too. I appreciate all that, and you can see the partnership with Washington's always been a little bit unique as East Metro County, but it also, through things like this, has stayed strong, and they testified on homelessness this year at the Capitol, and it goes beyond one topic. It's also good, I'm not asking these questions in the way of it's a bad time, and so it's good to ask them when it's not a bad time. It feels like it's less fraught. We have a lot of new folks on our team, so I do think it's a good moment also just to empower folks to realize, and I loved how you framed it. Like, if we ever hit points where we're concerned about it, let's make sure that we work both the angle of within the county. So the number one concern, I guess, I don't know how much everybody knows this, but like when this was getting sat down and I was 2 seats ago in this county and I was in the development of this with Zach at the time and others, it was a concern that like counties lose the ability at certain times to make adjustments aligned with their board. And it's actually worked really well. I think the structure that we have has worked really well in most of these spots. I just want to always make sure that was something we have talked about since then. And I trust that like you as a director would come back and say, this is inconsistent with public health. And, as we all have changed seats, that's just a really important thing to say out loud, because I realize when I look around, we're on iteration 2 of the R&E and the county environmental health staff. So it's good to have you.
Yeah. And Madam Chair, accountability comes up here, right? We're accountable to our vision, mission, and goals and strategic plan. So who's better off for these changes? And that's what I think as public health, but as a county, we have to lean into more and more. And so I just want to add that, I don't mean to interrupt you, Commissioner Reinhardt, but that, I think that's really important that we stay true to that and that we remain accountable to the things that we are committing to. And then also, we're flexible and being innovative and visionaries, right, towards the future. And I think that's what excites me about the work of the R&E and environmental health.
Reinhardt, and then Commissioner.
Well, and I just want to say that, with Washington County, first of all, Trista, kudos to you for bringing along Commissioner Johnson and getting him excited about things. But I think that, you know, when that initial clash happened, we had a choice to make. And, we said, basically, okay, well, we're going to do our thing. I think that surprised them. They thought we would, you know, cut back or do something different. But then said, but we want to make sure that you say you're committed to this relationship, and you've got one year here. But if you don't, you know, you have to come back because you say that you are committed to the relationship and making it work. And they did. And now this is new in the process because they said, you know what, we need more information earlier on so that we can make sure that our entire board is aware of what's going on. But I think we've come a long way, and one of the things that Commissioner Miron especially kept saying over and over again, we value and we are committed to this relationship. But they have a different board. And that's, you know, when we have a different board, it may have different outcomes as well. But I think that our staff especially has really remained steadfast on our values.
Yep, thank you. And I appreciate us being able to have this conversation, right, without feeling like we have to defend what we've done, because it's, you know, my comments weren't anyway, hopefully, you know, interpreted that way, but if we're not checking in, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, one of the pieces here to me that I think I want to really reinforce, right, because your question back this way, because I teed it up that, you know, my comments are really direct here, the policymakers that sit on that governing board, and I have no doubt the board as a whole does its best, right? But it's a combined board, and that board may do its best, but it doesn't actually really align with and advance what this board needs to do and where we're going. But the key here, I think, is to your point, back to these people here in the leadership, right? Because those are the answers that, you know, any board, or at least boards that really want to make sure that we're, you know, performing at a level of excellence or shooting to a level of excellence, those were the right responses. The next step is the agency to be able to come back and say, you know what, we've got to have a conversation here. Because we have concerns either about, you know, we're just spinning our wheels over here and we're not moving forward in the way that we need to move forward in, or we're putting too much effort into trying to bring along a partner that has value, other values when you do that, but at what point is that effort actually needed other places? And, you know, those are the right questions and the right answers. The test is going to be, do we have the courage and the ability and the agency to feel like we could actually do that in a way that can bring that conversation through the county manager and then back to, you know, the policymakers that are actually a part of that. So, you know, I think just being able to say that out loud is really important, right?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I wanted to offer, to the point of accountability, I'm a Ramsey County employee, and, you know, I report to Sarah on up, and, so, I mean, there's that accountability there, and I need to ensure that Ramsey County's, needs are met, and my counterpart, Nikki Stewart, she's got her allegiance to Washington County, and we're working together on that. We also have right now, Renee Vogt is, on our joint, our joint leadership team. We are transitioning or proposing a transition where we created a Ramsey Washington Financial Advisory Work Group that's made up of Washington County Finance and Ramsey County Finance, so that the interests of Ramsey County's you know, interests are represented in those discussions. You know, and all these policy discussions that we're discussing today have been vetted through that group and will continue to be. And as we chart any, make any changes, directed by the board, we will be working with that group as an advisory group to provide their input.
So, and I'm glad Washington County asked for this, right? And then be careful what you ask for, right? So, I mean, is there value, or are we at a spot where, and again, I'm far enough removed, to not necessarily know, but, I mean, are we to a point now where, we're still subsidizing, right? I think you said 104 for.
Yeah.
Are we to a point where this board should give direction that this should become a fully enterprised fund that supports itself? Another direction or policy would be any funds that come in, whether they're from the recycling or whatever, and joint development should always support at least that level in the continuum or higher, but should never be used to support something lower in the continuum. Kind of two policy pieces, right? Move to an enterprise fund, and all dollars that come in need to at least stay at that level or go higher, and should never be used to support something lower on the continuum.
I'm chair of it this cycle, and the plan has always been that the tipping fee would cover the cost. We have, we've owned it since 2016, and really didn't get, it sounds like a long time ago, but it really isn't, especially with all of the things that we've done in that pretty short period of time. And we needed to try to ratchet it up. We needed to get rid of the direct subsidy fully funded without any subsidy. But at least the subsidy doesn't go to the haulers at this point. So it's a matter of ratcheting it up and trying to do it in a way that wasn't such a big hit right away. So I think we're on the same plane there. As far as
I'm sorry.
as far as the finance committee does work with the budget to try to figure out, okay, which funds go where and what makes the most sense and what's the most volatile. The tip fee, we do have that one as a much more reliable figure. But what you brought up are good discussions to have at the finance committee.
And I could, maybe it's time where we're close enough now where we actually formalize that with a timeline, right? We want to be fully enterprised on not just operations, but maintenance and equipment replacement, whatever that looks like. We want us to, as a, board, take this policy that we no longer subsidize with resources, anything be lower on the continuum from where that revenue comes in. So that means on waste to energy only gets paid for on revenue that comes in from the waste that's going to energy, right? And no other farther up. But, I'm saying, maybe I got confidence that you're on this path, but do we make it a little bit more formalized? Do we actually put a timeline to enterprise fund? Is there a line in the values of the board that, how these resources get used have to support at least here or above from where they come in, to give confidence to both partners that we are moving, we're coming together and working together, but we are advancing along timelines that, one of us may be farther ahead than the other at certain points in time.
Oh, I keep going the wrong direction.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I am not on that board now, but I can see the charts that you're talking about. They're still in my head, and I know there were some adjustments in terms of getting this work started out of the box, and some unexpected things that happened in the early years. But I can imagine that those charts are still out there, and that the board is tracking on, that point at which we will be able to see those numbers even. And I think it probably is a good time, because I feel as though we did that early on. We were looking out at those points and then had to make some adjustments. This is probably a good time to look at that again. And I do see heads nodding here that, yeah, we're having those discussions.
Oh, yeah.
Again, I can see the charts in my head, you know, and that this could be a good time to reintroduce those discussions and start pinpointing that direction again.
And we should always be having those discussions. But we are also looking at a major change in gasification.
Mhm.
And that is going to make a difference in this tipping fee. And so it's, I wouldn't want to say,
I understand.
before we know what those numbers are, we need to figure out how to do this. And, yeah, I mean, could we just do it each year? But I think, well, again, that's kind of the
We don't wanna
finance
make
call
policy
to everybody else. But we're trying to get there, but we are making more improvements than would probably have been anticipated by a regular business.
Mhm.
So we have tried to, regulate how that goes forward. But gasification, and I think we've got an RFP out right now, or where are we at with that?
Negotiations.
Madam Chair, Commissioners,
That was,
our
Yeah.
Our process right now is focused on anaerobic digestion,
Oh.
and, but the
That's
original RFP did focus on gasification. The responses we got back, do not appear to meet our current needs, so I anticipate that we will be going back out with another procurement process related to gasification.
Well, and the point here is, when we took it over, one of the promises that we made was that we weren't gonna just, okay, now we can take a breath and do everything the same way we were doing it.
Yeah.
But all of those things, we're working on them pretty rapidly compared to, well, there was no movement forward when it was privately owned. But we made that commitment, and that we weren't gonna sit around and wait.
yeah, and I know we are pretty much at time, so I just want to add that, you know, it's 6 years since you've had it, we've already made this major investment into all these updates to do the food scrap bag collection, that the work we're doing now with anaerobic digestion and where that may go, is going to be a substantial change. We're still in the process of evaluating what the needs are staffing-wise, to fully roll out the food scrap bag program. And, you know, as you noted on here, we're adding 2 staff. That was a change that was unanticipated, and we've asked the team to go back and figure out what is this going to look like at scale, what are we going to need, and when are we going to need people, because we don't want to create positions that are ostensibly permanent that we won't need full-time. I think it's probably too early to move specific funding streams, but I would say that the goals and the direction that we're going are meeting all of those needs, particularly with the anaerobic digestion, which isn't just a waste solution, it's an energy and climate solution. We can talk more about that sometime, what we did in Sweden there and England, and what we learned about that process. So I think there are still undergoing rapid changes, and the fact that we won't be able to be burning in 2027. There are so many massive changes that will be happening in the next 5 years. I'm worried less about where the dollar, like what particular revenue stream is funding what, versus are we making progress? And we are making substantial, rapid, transformational progress in this with our partners. So I think while we should keep that in the back of our mind moving forward, we are still in a really rapid, expansive growth phase, and I don't want to give limiting directions to our team that would prohibit that growth in some way, unexpected way. With that, it is 3. Any final words, Sarah, Michael?
Madam Chair, I would just ask maybe that this be something we keep in the back of our heads to do an annual thing on, as we're going through a lot of change at the site. It's a good reminder, as Commissioner Reinhardt framed it. I mean, a lot going on. It's a good check-in once a year, particularly before you get into budget season. That's a real pain point, honestly, for organizations if we wait until then. So this is a pretty good summer update. And it also gives R&E staff a chance to get to hear the board talk, because you hear a subset of the board with the Washington board, but it's always a little different here. So, Michael, good job your first time doing it. And Sarah,
Yeah,
thank
well
you as
done.
well.
Yeah, Michael.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I did have and Commissioners, I did have a brief update. So on Thursday, following the R&E board meeting, there's going to be a workshop on the food scrap bag program. And we are being very intentional about how we're rolling things out, just to, as far as messages, and we're trying to get cross with many of our stakeholders. But so proposed dates and communities have been determined for the food scraps pickup program pilot and rollout phases. The proposed schedule is subject to change. Staff will be sharing that information again on June 23rd at the R&E Board Workshop. The food scraps pickup program model has not been implemented at this scale before. The counties will be evaluating the implementation of this new program on an ongoing basis and adjusting it as it is rolled out, which may impact communities participating and the timing of the program phases. At the June 23rd R&E Board Workshop, staff plan to share the program development efforts, including the tentative timeline for a pilot test and the phased rollout to Ramsey and Washington County communities. Information will be provided to you, county commissioners, and the county manager following this meeting on the 23rd. We will be informing pilot communities ahead of the June 23rd board workshop. Following the board workshop, we will plan on informing phased launch communities and haulers as well. So it is an exciting week for us.
Funny to do that on the day when it says in the paper they're giving waste management a hard time in St. Paul for whether they're coming to pick anything up right now. But,
That compost.
All right,
yeah,
thank you.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good job.